So I think it's high time to start. It's 5 o'clock.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so we start our session. Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги, участники Казанского международного лингвистического саммита и гости. Меня зовут Гафиятова, я сегодня являюсь модератором данной сессии и рада приветствовать вас. Мы продолжаем работу нашего саммита и хотели бы выразить вам большую благодарность за то, что вы нашли сегодня время, присоединились и будете слушать наших спикеров. Я очень также рада приветствовать наших уважаемых гостей из зарубежных университетов, партнеров из США и Великобритании. У нас сегодня запланированы на данной сессии 2 выступления. Участники могут задавать вопросы, и прежде всего позвольте представить наших гостей. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, participants of Kazan International Linguistic Summit and guests. I am Гафиятова, and I'm happy to welcome you. We continue the work of our summit. Thank you very much for everybody for joining us, and I'm very happy to welcome our speakers from foreign partner universities from the USA and the United Kingdom. We will be having 2 presentations, and participants are very welcome to ask questions. I would like to encourage you to send your questions to the chat. First of all, let me introduce our guests. Наш первый гость – доктор Ана Оскоз, профессор университета Мэриленда, Балтимор. Ее исследования фокусируются на изучении компьютерной грамотности, межкультурной коммуникации и письме на иностранном языке. Доктор Оскоз также является соредактором журнала CALICO, индексируемого в базе данных Scopus, и членом международных исследовательских групп Telnet.com и Collaborative Projects. Ввиду разницы во времени Ана Оскоз записала выступление заранее, поэтому мы сегодня посмотрим запись. Если от вас будут поступать вопросы, мы направим их Ане. Как только поступит ответ, мы с вами обратно свяжемся. Our first guest is Dr. Ана Оскоз. She is a professor at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Her research focuses on digital literacies, intercultural communication, and second language writing. Dr. Oskos is also co-editor of CALICO Journal indexed in Scopus and a member of the international research groups Telnet.com and Collaborative Projects. Due to the time lag, Dr. Ana Oskos recorded the performance in advance. Therefore, we will watch the recording today. If you have any questions, we will direct them to Anna. As soon as we receive an answer, we will contact you. So, please, we can start. Девочки, пожалуйста, запускаем видео.
Welcome everybody, and thank you for coming to my presentation about the CALICO Journal. I am Ana Oskos from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and together with Brian Smith from Arizona State University, I am the editor of the CALICO Journal. Before I would like to start the presentation, before I start the presentation, I would like to thank the organizers of the second Kazan International Linguistic Summit, titled Linguistic Diversity in the Global World, for inviting me to participate in this summit. In particular, I would like to thank Dr. Гафиятова, Deputy Director for International Affairs and Development at Kazan Federal University, for providing me this opportunity to talk about the journal. Thank you very much. It is an honor, and I hope that at the end of this presentation, you will consider submitting your manuscripts to our journal. I wish I could have been in person synchronously with you. It was not possible, but please, you have my email on the screen, aoskoz@umbc.edu. Sometimes I don't remember my email. So please feel free to contact me if you have any questions afterwards. Here we have the whole editorial team. We have Brian Smith, we have Oksana Boroval, Teresa Schrenker, and I didn't have pictures for Esther Horn and Michael Winans. When I am talking about the CALICO Journal today, I'm going to go through different steps. First of all, I'm going to provide you the mission of the journal. Then I'm going to follow with some information about the journal and also how we organize the different issues. And I will especially focus on 3 areas that are of relevance when we are reviewing manuscripts and what we expect to see in the manuscripts that we receive. I will follow with talking about special issues that we are holding in the CALICO Journal. And finally, I will encourage you to submit to our journal. So the journal was founded in 1983 and is the official publication of the Computer Assisted Language Instruction Consortium, also called CALICO. The journal, as you have on the screen, is devoted to the dissemination of information concerning the application of technology to language teaching and language learning. And this is really important because we are taking into account manuscripts that focus both on the use of technology and language learning. So now let me move on to some description about the journal. So the journal is published only online. It is fully refereed, and we are publishing research articles, whether they are quantitative or qualitative in nature. We are also publishing software reviews and book reviews. There are 3 issues that used to appear before January, May, and September. Now we move them to February, June, and October. And usually the February issue is a thematic issue that focuses on an area of interest. To be a little bit more specific, each issue is composed of the different stages that you see here. So we have the editor's piece, which tends to be a short piece in which we focus on an area that is relevant for current events that are happening in the world, or that focuses on an issue that we are seeing at the journal. So, for example, in 2020, I think it was June 2020, we, Oskos and Smith, we published Unprecedented Times, and it was a piece in which we addressed the impact of COVID-19, the impact that it was having on all of us as researchers, but also the human toll that was that we were suffering in, and also our students, because of the pandemic. Given the increasing amount of quantity of manuscripts that we are receiving that are focusing on commercial call products, Vorobel and Smith wrote a piece in which they were giving guidelines to authors that wish to submit articles based on commercial product. So we always think what is needed in the field, what is happening around us, and how we're going to respond. Usually another common section that we have in the journal in each issue is a spotlight article or a review article. The review articles are usually invited articles and that examine the state of the field in a specific area. For example, however, and sometimes those specific areas, they tend to be a review of something that has happened in the past, or we are looking towards the future. Haven and Corper in 2019 wrote a manuscript, an article towards transdisciplinarity in computer-assisted language learning, and they examined the notion of transdisciplinarity as an emerging theme in applied linguistics, which is the area more closely related to CAL. The authors expanded on the notion of CAL as potential transdisciplinary field and provided a descriptive framework of transdisciplinary types. Following the editor's piece and the spotlight article, we usually have a few articles that they range on different topics. We can be looking at teachers and learners' experience and attitudes. We can be looking at telecollaborative encounters among different countries. We can be looking at different ways of approach listening or writing in the classroom or in second language learning in general. I would like to focus on one very specific point, and is that in CALICO there is a tendency to publish manuscripts that focus on English, the teaching of English as a second or as a foreign language. And we also find that many of our manuscripts are coming from authors based either in North America or in Western Europe, with a smaller representation of authors from Latin America, Eastern Europe, Asia, or Africa. And this is my encouragement to you. We are looking for manuscripts that are focusing on other languages, but in particularly less commonly taught languages, and from different geographical areas. For example, here you see that one of the articles is focusing on Swedish. The other article is focusing on a video conference in English-Spanish in tandem exchange. English-Spanish, they are not non-commonly taught languages. They are commonly taught, at least in the US system. But and that's why we are wanting to see more manuscripts that are giving us different perspectives from different languages and places. For example, the Swedish language. So if you're conducting research in a language other than English, or even if you are conducting research in English as a second or as a foreign language, I encourage you to submit to the CALICO Journal. We finished each issue with the book and the software reviews. We do not accept unsolicited reviews from authors. We have a bank of reviewers who usually come from the readership of CALICO Journal. If you were interested in becoming one of the reviewers, please contact us, let me know, and we could add you to the list of potential reviewers. The editors will contact you, the editors of the technology reviews, of the book reviews, they will contact you and provide you the specific guidelines to conduct those reviews and the products and the books that they would like you to review. So now that we have seen an overall view of each issue, I'm going to focus on 3 different areas that are of interest to us as editors of the journal, and that we really take into consideration that when we are reviewing a manuscript, and when we send the manuscripts out to reviews to external reviewers. Those 3 areas are related to the theoretical framework, which usually appears in the literature review, how the methodology is presented, and how the evidence is helping us to move the field forward. Before I move on, I would like to start by saying that often as academics, we tend to we feel the pressure to publish, and sometimes we focus more on the quantity than on the quality. In an editorial that Brian Smith and I wrote in 2018, we look at all these 3 components, and we also echoed Kolper's concern for academic meritocracy, which to some extent, and I'm going to quote, is leading to an obsessive rat race whereby scholars are more worried with the quantity than with the quality of their academic production. And I would like to remind you that the purpose of our research, the purpose of what we are here, is to advance knowledge in our particular areas of expertise. So now that I have said that, I'm going to focus on these 3 main areas, which are, as I said, the presence of a theoretical framework, which usually appears in the literature review, a clear methodology, and the presence of clear evidence. So first of all, The inquiries that address the existing gaps in the research should align CAL work with the current discourses in applied linguistics. As Smith and I mentioned in the 2018 editorial, sometimes one of the dangers of technology-enhanced language learning is that we get mesmerized by the constant technological innovations. And when we read manuscripts, we find that sometimes the authors are so enthralled with the tool itself that the literature review displays minimal or no understanding of the theoretical and the practical frameworks that inform our knowledge of how languages are acquired. So that would be an area that I really would emphasize to all of you, to everyone who is interested in conducting research with technology. We really need to be aware of what the theoretical or practical framework we are following that is informing our research. So we are looking for theoretical frameworks that provide very detailed accounts of theoretical, pedagogical, or practical frameworks. And here we are talking about sociocultural theory or activity theory or community of inquiry or self-determination theory that will inform the study. So the significance of this framework cannot be underestimated. As you can see here, it is informing our research questions, very important, the methodology employed, the analysis conducted, the results, and how the discussion will be framed. Sometimes we find manuscripts with superficial descriptions or outdated, or that are using outdated and empirically supported or generally criticized frameworks that are not helping, that do not provide a sound basis for analysis and are not contributing to the discussion. So that's something to be aware of. When we are looking at the methodology, we need to remember that the main goal of analyzing learner-computer interactions should be to detect, localize, describe, explain, and interpret change. Whether we are aiming to explain language learning processes, language learning, as a social process or as a cognitive process, our studies require a well-crafted design that consider all the contextual factors as carefully as possible, as reasonable as possible. So this means that whether we are reporting on an experimental or quasi-experimental, qualitative or mixed studies, and the author should clearly specify, describe, and justify participants' tasks, tools, length of treatment, and units of analysis. So, and third, we need to provide in the manuscripts, we are looking for specific and detailed evidence that provide complete and non-skewed interpretation of the data. But we need to, by analyzing the linguistic data in line with the selected theoretical frameworks, the authors can present accurate pictures of the language phenomena and processes under investigation. Therefore, what we welcome CALICO Journal are manuscripts that align with current and evolving discourses in applied linguistics and that embark on systematic analysis of the second language learner's use and development in diverse cultural, multilingual, and social contexts. So to summarize, we have the three main points here. We are looking for a literature review that provides a detailed account of theoretical, pedagogical, or practical frameworks. We are looking for methodology sections that specify, describe, and justify the study's participants, tasks, tools, length of treatment, and units of analysis. And we are looking for analysis of linguistic data that is in line with the selected theoretical or practical framework. So now you are going to be wondering, well, we are doing all this work, how are the manuscripts reviewed? So once an author submits a submission, it goes through an in-house review. And if the editorial team sees that we have all the components that I have pointed out, the research questions, a clear theoretical framework, the methodology well explained, the results, etc., we send it to the external reviewers. They usually provide feedback regarding the article, and the external reviewers are focusing on the specific particular area of the manuscript. The authors, they answer, we ask them to answer in around 5 weeks. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, mainly now at the time of the pandemic, when everybody has been a little overwhelmed. It might take up to 2 months, a little bit more, but we're trying to speed it up. Once we get the comments, the feedback from the external reviewers, we decide, and based on the editorial decision, we invite the authors to resubmit again, or we send them the comments, we decline it, but send them the comments, and so the author can still look at the manuscript and make changes if needed, or when needed, or as needed. If the authors decide to resubmit again, we send it back to the same external reviewers as possible, and then based on the feedback that they provide, the editorial team completes a final decision. And so this is about the CALICO Journal, how it functions every day and what we can see in every issue. I would like to focus a little bit now on the special issues that we have every February. The purpose of these special issues, if I may repeat the same word, is to focus on a topic that is related, that is timely and compelling on call at that time, and that will resonate with the leadership and will mainly and hopefully move the field forward. That's the main goal. We always want to move the field forward. Oh, sorry. In the last years, we had several issues that have focused on different topics. For example, in 2019, we had an issue that focused on critical call, and the main emphasis was promoting social justice on call. In 2020, the special issue was focusing on pragmatics in digital spaces, and what the authors were doing were exploring innovative approaches to L2 pragmatics in informal and informal learning and digitally mediated spaces. So it was beyond the classroom, it was in the classroom and outside the classroom. This past year, Lord and Dubrell edited the volume Innovation and Creation, Harnessing the Maker Movement in Call. And in this volume, they were bringing together different approaches that were looking at learning as a maker culture. And they were looking at processes of bringing multimedia projects together, and they were in which students were creating, they were producing creative projects that connected the language classroom with authentic language practices outside the classroom. The next issue, which will appear in February 2022, is focusing on emergency remote language teaching and learning. And it's focused on the type of emergency teaching that happens when we are in periods of distress. And it can be a pandemic like we are living now, but it can be also a natural disaster. It can be a socio-political turbulence, and it can be any other state of chronic and extended distress. And it may seem that it's really far away, but we are already working on the special issue for February 2023, which is going to be Cross-XR, Crossing Reality to Enhance Language Learning. And in this case, the editors are looking for manuscripts that focus on virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality for language learning and culture. So as you can see, the special issues are very diverse. So what we can do with CAL and language learning and teaching with technology is a very wide, there can be many topics. So now it's my time to introduce you to this. So you have listened to the presentation, and I just have a few questions to ask you. And if you answer yes to all of them, you should be ready to submit something to us. So the question would be, are you interested in language learning and technology? Yes. Is your work informed by a theoretical or pedagogical framework? Can you specify, describe, and justify your participants, tasks, tools, length of treatment, and units of analysis? And finally, is the analysis of the linguistic data in line with selected frameworks to present accurate picture of the language phenomena and processes under investigation? So if you have answered yes to these questions, you are ready to submit. I have included here our websites for the journal, journal.equinospav.com/calico or journal.equinospav.com/calico/about/submissions. And with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation. Again, thank you very much. Spasibo. I hope to receive your presentation.
So thank you very much. As I have told you before, it was the recording from Dr. Ана Оскоз. If I'm not mistaken, she's connected, she is with us. Dr. Ана Оскоz, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Hello, nice to meet you.
How are you doing?
Hello, we are fine. So thank you very much for your presentation. It was very nice. And due to our time limit, I would like to ask a question in a chat. I see one question. Olga Shelestova is our colleague. She writes, I have a question about software reviews. What if the program is new and not very popular yet? Are there any requirements to such programs, and do I need to be a software engineer to work on such an article?
So you don't have to be a software engineer. Well, first of all, thank you for the question very much. You don't have to be a software engineer to do the review of to write a review. It doesn't have to be a very popular program either. Usually what we do, the editors of the journal, the ones that are in charge of the technology reviews or the book reviews, they have a set of programs that they want our reviewers to review for the journal, and then they invite reviewers to do so. But if you were interested in reviewing a specific program, you might want to contact them and say, hey, I have seen this program. I think it's been very interesting. I would like to know if you would be interested in a review. And then they would send you, if they were interested, then they would send you the form that they usually follow to complete the reviews.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I understand. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I do not see any more questions in the chat. Dear colleagues, do you have questions? So if you have questions, you can send using chat. Okay, so I do not see, and the others. Okay, so if we will have more questions, we will send by email. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ekaterina, do you want to ask something?
Yes, it's just general question. Hello, thank you very much for your speech. I'm sorry, I should, okay, my camera on. Yes, no, yes. Hello. Thank you. Could you tell, please, in general, how much time does it take to publish an article?
It really depends, and it's really going to depend on the reviewers. And throughout the pandemic, it has been a little bit more difficult to get timely reviews because everybody was consumed by the pandemic and they had personal or professional issues that made the process slower. We definitely try to do the in-house reviews within 2 weeks. Then if the editors believe the manuscript has the requirements, the minimum requirements, we send it out to external reviewers. We give them around 5 weeks. Sometimes they do it within those 5 weeks. Sometimes it takes longer. We need to find other reviewers. So it's really going to depend on the reviewers and how much time they need to complete the review. And then once we get the reviews, we send them back to the authors, we give them time. And again, the authors take, even though we might give like a month or 5 weeks, it might take longer. And we are flexible in that sense that these authors need more time, we can give more time. But then everything slowers the process or makes the process longer.
Okay.
But it really depends. But we try to have it done in a timely manner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So one more question.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your interesting talk. Yeah, because I guess we're all interested in publishing our articles, and especially for the postgraduate students, to defend our thesis. And actually, I work in a laboratory, and the question is how many authors are allowed to be enlisted in this article. For example, so we linguists work together with programmers and with people who does statistics. That was the question.
So we have multi-authors manuscripts. If that's your question, we accept multi-author manuscripts. We are not looking so much at, we are not looking at the quantity of authors who are part of a manuscript. We are looking at the quality of the manuscripts. So if you are saying that you're going to have 3 people in a manuscript, it's totally fine. I am actually working for someone else on a chapter, and we are 3 authors. So it is not uncommon.
Yeah.
And you may even have more, I don't know. But it's not uncommon to have more than 1 author in manuscripts. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oskos. So if we have any more questions, we will send by email. Thank you very much. So we continue with our schedule, and the next speaker, I would like to introduce our next speaker. Итак, уважаемые гости, если у вас остались вопросы к доктору Анне Оскоз, вы можете их задать, мы их направим с использованием имейла, и затем предоставим вам ответы. Итак, я хотела бы пригласить нашего следующего гостя из Великобритании, профессора Хилари Неси. Она является профессором английского языка в Центре искусств, памяти и сообщества университета Ковентри. Ее исследовательская деятельность в основном затрагивает изучение англоязычного дискурса в научных целях, а также составление и использование словарей и справочных материалов. Профессор Неси являлась ведущим исследователем проекта по созданию корпуса британского научного разговорного английского языка и корпуса британского научного письменного английского языка. Наряду с этим осуществляла руководство созданием письменных материалов для раздела изучения английского языка сайта British Council. Она является одним из главных редакторов журнала «Английский язык в научных целях», индексируемого в базе данных Scopus. So, and I would like to invite our next speaker from the United Kingdom, Professor Hilari Nesi. She is a professor of English language in the Center for Arts, Memory and Communities, Koventri University. Her research activities mostly concern the discourse of English for academic purposes and the design and use of dictionaries and reference tools. She was principal investigator for the projects to create the corpus of British academic spoken English and the corpus of British academic written English. And she also led the project to produce academic writing materials for the British Council Learn English website. Hilari is one of the editors-in-chief of Journal of English for Academic Purposes Index in Scopus. And I'm giving the floor to Professor Hilari. Please, we're happy to welcome you.
Thank you very much. I'll share my screen just to get started. Here we are. And the slideshow.
Yes, it's fine. It works. Everything is fine.
That's great. Okay, right. Slideshow. Yes, here we are. Okay, so thank you very, very much for inviting me to this conference. And I wish I could be. It sounds a fantastic place where you are, and I'd love to have been there in person, but thank you very much, the organisers. It's a great opportunity to get to meet you in a way and find out a bit more about what's going on at your institution. So I'm going to be talking about the Journal of English for Academic Purposes. Here's the web page, the official web page. So you can find online. So that gives you quite a bit of information, which I'm not going to provide during the talk. You can access that just by going online. And I'm one of the editors-in-chief together with Guang Wei Hu, who's based in Hong Kong, and we have a couple of associate editors too. Okay, so why Journal of English for Academic Purposes? Why might you be interested in publishing? We call it JEAP. So this talk I'm going to cover what kind of articles it publishes and who it's for, what the stages are towards getting published, and what kind of impact your article is likely to have if it gets published. So I hope those are the kind of questions that you wanted answered in this talk, but if not, you can always ask questions at the end. So first of all, is your article right for JEAP? On the website, it says it publishes articles, book reviews, conference reports, and academic exchanges concerning the linguistic, social linguistic, and psycholinguistic descriptions of English. Well, most of the things that JEAP publishes are in fact research articles. We also have 2 or 3 book reviews each issue, but they're not unsolicited. They are requested. So if you wanted to submit an article to JEAP, it would be either a standard research article or something we call a researching EAP practice article, which is shorter and has a shorter literature review and is more focused on the practical experience of using English for academic purposes as opposed to a more theoretical background. So you can choose which of those interests you. The majority of people who submit to JEAP submit research articles, and they are linguistic and they are about English. So although you might also include references to other languages, they have to include a discussion of the nature of English. You might want to have a look at the references in your own article and consider, who are you citing? Are you citing anyone from JEAP or from a similar journal? If you're not, then that's a kind of indication that maybe it's not the right journal for you. Also, very important, it's got to be English for the purposes of academic study and scholarly exchange. So that means you could be writing about presentations or assignment writing or listening to lectures or presenting at conferences or listening to conferences or writing research articles, all those kind of things that go on in the medium of English in academic environments. But actually, we do get a lot of submissions that write about English for general purposes, and we don't publish those. So if you had a nice article about teaching English in a university, but not for the purposes of academic study and scholarly exchange, just to develop general English language skills, that would not be the right article for JEEP. I'm sorry to include sort of rather depressing information, but you might as well know about 60% of manuscripts to JEEP are desk rejected. That means that they don't go out to review. You will get an answer back within 2 weeks of submission saying that it's not going to go out for review and it's been rejected. So why so many? Well, one obvious thing is that if it's not acceptable in terms of language or length, then it will get desk rejected. That usually isn't seen. Those kind of articles are not seen by the editors. In fact, they're dealt with by an editorial assistant at Elsevier, the publisher, and they will pick out and reject things that are clearly never going to get published, and which, if we sent them to review, it would annoy the reviewers. We don't want to annoy the reviewers by sending them stuff which is clearly unpublishable. The other reasons are that the study is out of scope, which means that it's not about the kind of things that JEEP publishes. And a further possibility, it's rejected because it doesn't report on original work. So that might be because in actual fact the same research has been published elsewhere. We can pick that up through our we have originality tests to see whether the author is repeating things that have been written in other articles. So quite a bit of that is picked up automatically, but we do look carefully and see whether the author is repeating what has been said in another article to comment on it, or whether they're simply repeating it in order to get an extra publication or to steal ideas from somebody else. Here's a desk reject letter for language. Fairly standard thing. That was not written by an editor, that was written by an editorial assistant at Elsevier. And here's one out of scope, and that was written by an editor, and it's trying to explain to the author. It could be a perfectly good article. It doesn't quite fit within the scope of the journal. Your participants were in a general English class, and the study is primarily concerned with the development of their general writing skills rather than development of their ability to perform academic writing tasks designed to measure disciplinary skills and knowledge. I must therefore reject it. This is quite a close call, because sometimes the author might feel that yes, it's relevant to their disciplinary skills and knowledge. So we have to read these kind of articles quite carefully to see whether it's possible to make them within the scope of JEEP or not. And here's a rather rare thing, which is an invitation to revise before review, written by an editor, where the editor clearly thinks that it could be publishable within JEEP, but it's not really enough about issues that face L2 writers and EAP, because EAP, English for Academic Purposes, is about supporting and advising people for whom English is not their first language. So you can write about supporting and advising people where English is their first language, but you have to include some discussion of people for whom English is not their first language. And in this case, the editor is saying, just rework your paper, put in a bit more about EAP issues, and then we'll send it out to review. That's what they're saying. A manuscript can also be rejected because it doesn't make a sufficient contribution to the field. And I think that's a very interesting, important point, because as I think one of the people who asked a question in the previous talk said there's a lot of pressure on people to publish, and it's easy to find a framework or an approach which you can, the author can demonstrate their research skills, they can demonstrate their research ability, going through the processes of producing a research article, where really there's nothing wrong with the literature review, really. There's nothing wrong with the methodology, there's nothing wrong with the analysis, but the sum doesn't actually say anything that's really very interesting. Poor author, the problem is that they weren't motivated by, or they don't appear to have been motivated by a burning problem. A good article that's likely to be accepted is one where the author or authors are really anxious to address some issue that they feel it's important to answer, and they convey that motivation in their writing. They explain to the reader why it's necessary to investigate this, and they explain to the reader what the significance of their findings are. Sometimes we can remedy an article, you know, when it goes out for review, and we can encourage an author to make it more of a contribution to the field. But sometimes we just have to say it's like an assignment for a research methodology class, and you've gone through all the steps, but there's nothing there of interest to readers. It's the takeaway message. That's the point. What does the reader take away from this article? What have they learned that they didn't know before? There's got to be a good takeaway message. Okay, so what are the stages towards getting published? We've got here a sort of flow chart. I'll just talk you through it. You submit your paper. We have to ask whether the basic requirements have been met. So in terms of language, in terms of structure, length, and so on. Some of this will be looked at by an assistant to the publisher, and some of this will be looked at by the editors. If those basic requirements are met, it goes out to review, and then the reviewers review it and they give their recommendation. The editors collect the reviewers' recommendations. The editors make a decision. They can decide to reject it, to accept it, or to ask for revisions. It's almost unknown for a paper to be accepted first time round. They nearly all, I mean, I've never come across a case where we've just said, yes, it's perfect, we'll publish it straight away. There's a very, very good paper, we might just ask them for a few little tweaks. More often than not, the reviewers have made some really interesting points that could improve the paper, and we're asking for a revise. And therefore, it goes to revision, back to the author who rewrites it, resubmits it, and it goes round again. This process could go round 2, 3 times, maybe 4. At a certain point, it might be very close to acceptance, and we no longer send it out to the reviewers because we think as editors we can read it through one last time and just suggest a few little final changes before it's accepted. So going back to the reviewing process, how do we choose reviewers? Well, that's quite, I mean, to my mind, that's one of the main jobs of an editor, is finding reviewers that are right and dealing with reviewers. That's a really major part of our work. And we're drawing on all our knowledge of the field and of individuals. And sometimes it's easy to find reviewers and sometimes it's difficult. If it's a rather unusual topic, we might find it really quite difficult to find suitable reviewers. The authors are asked to suggest reviewers when they submit, but we can't always accept their suggestions for one reason or another, which I'll expand on in a moment. I mean, one possible reason is that the reviewers that they want as reviewers are very busy reviewing other articles, and we can't overload them. We can't ask them to review lots and lots of articles at once. So we're looking around. If you've referred to a recent article in your literature review, for example, and you've referred favourably to it, and you give us the impression that this article is relevant to your own work, then we might very well ask the author of that article to review your article. So bear that in mind. But we also draw on our own knowledge, and we often turn to the editorial board, because the editorial board is made up of very experienced reviewers who understand what JEEP is about. They understand the kind of articles that we publish, and they're in a good position to advise. Whoever the reviewer is, they have to have a web presence. We sometimes get suggestions for review from the authors, and we can't find them. We can't find those people because they're not on a university webpage. So maybe they are very good reviewers, but unless they are validated by being on a university webpage somewhere, either as postdoctoral researchers or as members of staff or in some capacity, we can't really invite them because we don't really know who they are. We don't take reviewers who are affiliated to the author in any way. So you can't choose, or we won't choose, a reviewer who was the supervisor of the author or a colleague of the author, or even in the same institution as the author, or even in many cases in the same country as the author. I mean, sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes we choose the same country or the same region, but we make sure that they're sufficiently distant, that they're not prejudiced, as it were. And reviewers are asked to say that there isn't a conflict of interest. When we invite them, sometimes a reviewer will come back and say, I'm sorry, I can't review this because I'm about to co-author a paper with this person, or I know this person, and therefore they can't. That's not appropriate for them to review. Reviewers do not know the authors. I'm pretty confident, except in the case of a few very famous people where it's almost impossible not to guess who they are by the way they write. For most authors, they can be pretty sure that their reviewers will not know who they are. They won't know what gender, they won't know their nationality necessarily, and therefore they're not those kind of they're going to give a balanced, honest opinion of what you've written, unprejudiced. So here's the reviewing process. We are very, very lucky with JEEP. I think it's probably because most people who review for JEEP have a background in teaching English for academic purposes. I've got a background in teaching English for academic purposes. I spent a lot of time teaching English to international students in my early career, and we're kind of helpful people. We really do want our authors to succeed. We really want to help them. So we write long reviews and as helpful as we possibly can. So the review time, they're given about 30 days to, a review is given up to about 30 days to complete. They don't always answer the invitation immediately. Sometimes a reviewer says they can't review, and then we have to go back again and find another reviewer. So we can't guarantee the time that it will take, but we try to do it as quickly as we can. And the reviewers may send your manuscript back for revision several times. It's only at the very end, when it's almost ready for publication. If I'm handling the paper as an editor, then I print it out, read it, and nearly always I notice some little thing that I want changing at the very end, like some tiny little problem. So I'll send it back one last time to ask the author to tweak it, just so that it's ready for publication. Because with G, once we've accepted for publication, it goes online. It is then in press. And at that point, if there may still be some small mistakes, so we try to eliminate them as much as we can. The publication process is such that it goes on, so that people can get their publications as fast as possible. It goes online as soon as it's accepted. And then there's a kind of period within which the final proofs are checked, and any final little changes to formatting and language are changed before it is finally it's the final publication with page numbers and so on. So we really want to thank our reviewers. They put in lots of time. They don't get paid. I mean, it's entirely a voluntary. They can easily say no, and they don't. So they are really fantastic, our reviewers. Sometimes they disagree. And then we have a bit of a problem. So we have, as an editor, I've got to decide what to do. You know, what if one reviewer says accept and the other one says reject? So there's a bit of negotiating going on there. We can bring in a third reviewer to look at the manuscript. We try as far as possible to send manuscripts back to the same reviewer for the revisions. So we don't, if you submit to G and then you get a revision request and you revise, normally it will go back to the same reviewers, right? So if one of them has rejected it, we can't send it back to that reviewer. We don't want to alienate our reviewers. So it's always a little bit tricky. We do our best to try and resolve those problems. Okay, so here are the recommendations. It's either accept, minor revisions, major revisions, or reject. About 30% are rejected after their first or second revision. So just because they've asked you to revise doesn't mean that it's accepted, I'm afraid. You've still got to be working on those revisions and trying to respond to what the reviewers say. You can see here a list of the editorial outcomes. Orange is submitted, blue is out for review, and this last one, grey, is finally accepted. I can't actually see, I'll just move this. Doesn't show, but I'll show it in the next one. Responding to reviewers is really important. You don't have to agree with everything that they say. That's fine. I mean, they're interested. If you don't agree, they'll be interested to know why. And you know, if you've got nice, interesting reasons for not agreeing with them, because they're prepared to accept that they're not right. But you do have to give a detailed response. It's not enough just to say, oh yes, I did that. I've done everything you suggested. Here's my revision. That's really not going to work. What you have to do is you've got to take each of the reviewer's comments and type your response below it. Or you can put it in a table. You can have the reviewer's comments in one column and your responses in the other column, so that the reviewer can check each one and see exactly what you have done. And you could highlight places in the manuscript when you resubmit. You could include page numbers. And if you're not accepting some of their suggestions, then you have to convince them why you're not accepting them. Remember to be polite. You know, it really doesn't, it's really counterproductive to write an angry message. I know from my own experience, that if you get a replies from reviewers and you think, oh, they didn't understand my paper, they misread it, that was what I was saying, why didn't they read what I'd said, and this kind of thing. So don't respond straight away. Take a bit of time out, leave it a few days until you calm down, and then even if you think that they're completely wrong, do thank them and say, because they meant well. You know, they weren't trying to be nasty. So thank them and write in such a way that they are well disposed towards you, because your response is going to be forwarded to that reviewer. If you are rejected, don't be downhearted, because we've all been rejected. All the editors have had their papers rejected. Top researchers have had their papers rejected. I've rejected papers from top researchers for Jeep. And so that's one reason not to be downhearted. The other reason not to be downhearted is because we can make mistakes. I mean, it could be that you've written a brilliant article and we just failed to recognize that fact. So rather than challenging their rejection, I don't think that's always, it's not worth writing and saying you don't accept the rejection. Sometimes people do, but it's not really worth doing. It's much better to read the comments carefully. You can always improve. Every article can be improved. Every piece of research can be improved, because no research is perfect. And then revise and resubmit elsewhere. There are other journals which publish very similar things to Jeep. English for Specific Purposes, for example, publishes a lot of articles that I personally think could have gone in Jeep. You know, if you were right and we were wrong, you'll get it published somewhere else. Here's a rejection letter after review. I think this is one that I wrote, and you notice I'm being quite kind because I don't like rejecting papers, and so I'm giving suggestions for what to do next. And one would be to develop it. Another would be, I mentioned before, research EAP practice. And here's the link to researching EAP practice. Shorter papers. So sometimes we think, well, actually this author might not have enough theory to make a good full research article, but they have got good experience, and therefore it might be able to be converted into a researching EAP practice paper. Here's the speed in which we publish. So you can see it's average weeks from submission to first decision, goes up and down. This is YTD is year to date, so you know, not final. Submission to acceptance is around 30 weeks. And then almost immediately it gets published on something called First Online, which means it's in press. Right? That's why we like to get it as perfect as possible before we accept, because it's that version is going to go online. It's called in press, so you can cite it, but you just put in press. And then there is a gap while we're checking the proofs, and you're checking the proofs as an author, and then it finally goes to final publication around 40 weeks. Okay? So that's the length of time it takes, is just under a year from start to finish. Average, yeah. No cost involved, unless you want to go for gold open access, or you want to include colour figures. Of course, the colour is only, oh, well, anyway, if you want off prints, you have to pay for them, but I don't think many people do nowadays. It's almost everyone goes online. There is a print version, but I don't think very many people have the print version. And this is the citations that we get for articles. This is a good reason for publishing in JEEP, because Elsevier's got a very good system for publicizing its articles. And you will get, as soon as you get published, you will have a link given to you which enables, which you can send out to anyone you like with free access for a certain amount of time. I think it's 30 days. But you will find that it appears in lots of citation, the places where articles are cited, and therefore the chances of citation are quite high for JEEP and for ESP Journal. You should get quite a lot of publicity from publishing in JEEP. I think probably just before I finish, if there's time, is there still time for a little bit? What I didn't say was the range of types of articles that are published in JEEP. You can see this for yourself if you go and have a look on the web pages, of course. But just to give you an idea, there's quite a range. They range from very qualitative studies. I've got here, I just picked up a paper copy. I said they didn't have paper copies, but I do happen to have some paper copies here for this year. There was, and here's one, deconstructing critical reflection in social work and business, negotiating emotions and opinions in reflective writing. So you've got at that end of the scale, and then you've got genre work, genre-based revising strategies of graduate students, and then you another genre, grant proposal abstracts, a prototypical move structure pattern. So we've got this sort of ESP genre work, and we've also got corpus linguistic work like lexical bundles, syntheses. We've got is postgraduate English academic writing more clausal or phrasal? No, so we've got the whole range really, from discourse analysis, genre analysis, surveys of students' responses or writer responses, and through to corpus linguistics. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Hilary Nesi. Thank you very much for your presentation. And we would like to specifically thank Journal JEEP for being the informational sponsor of our summit. Thank you.
Yes.
And now the participants, if you have questions, you can ask your questions and comments. Okay, I see Marina Solnышkina. So you are welcome, please.
Thank you very much, Hillary, and special thanks for the words which I heard when I joined the conversation. You said that we all, I mean, some of us experience this pressure to get published. Those are very dear words, and they're so true. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, and Elzara may confirm my words, we do experience pressure of another kind when we have to start a journal. Okay, so, and that's why my next question, maybe two questions, is about the starting process. And again, my apologies if you mentioned this earlier, but I didn't hear. Okay, well, first of all, about the scope of the topics or maybe fields or areas where you would like your journal to publish articles on. Definitely it is, or maybe it is likely to be wider than your own expertise.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I mean, as editor, there's, you know, there's so many different topics that I can't possibly, I mean, I'd have to be an absolute genius polymath to be able to feel confident about every paper. So that's why we rely on good reviewers. Yeah, but that also means, especially, I mean, if I may call it a market as American market of articles, okay? So how many articles
can a journal which has just started to expect to be submitted if we are entering the market which had been divided earlier than we entered it? Okay, who would like to get published? I mean,
yes, this is the problem. The problem is that you probably get lots of submissions, but the quality of the submissions won't be very good. And the reason for that is because it won't be Scopus recognized. It won't have cite, you know, it won't have citation, it won't have an impact factor, won't have citation scores. And so you yourselves, if with your PhD students, if you had a good student who had written a really good article, you would advise them to aim as high as they could, wouldn't you? You'd advise them to aim for a journal which had a good impact factor.
Yeah, probably, but we'll try and do this, but we also need what is called geography, or what we call geography, okay? So we need authors from different areas, say of the Russian Federation and probably of the world. And that is, again, that takes us back to the question of the scope, yeah? So yes, it is your expertise and the expertise of your editors, yeah? But it is also that part of linguistics, okay, if we speak about linguistics, which which not so many not so many journals is served by.
So you've got a niche. You've got a niche. Yes.
Yeah.
That would be that's the way to go, isn't it? Rather than try if you are publishing, if your journal covers an area which is not covered by other journals, then good authors will go to you because that's the right place for their article. Yes.
And that's why that's a balance, okay?
Yeah,
that's a balance,
I mean,
between being quiet.
you can, I mean, you could approach, I mean, I do find it good to be an editor for an Elsevier journal, or it doesn't have to be Elsevier, but one of the large publishing houses, should I say, because they have there's so much support, you know, in terms of checking for plagiarism, in terms of keeping track of reviewers, rating reviewers. I can look back and see the history, you know, all the sort of administrative work surrounding managing a journal is very well managed by these big publishers, because they've got systems in place, they've got software in place, and they've got people working full time just to answer technical queries. So if an author writes to me and says, I'm trying to submit but I can't because it doesn't let me in or something, I just email the publisher, and within a few hours I get a response back. They'll sort it out, so one way forward would be to approach a big publisher and ask them if they would consider a new title, and explain to them why this title is something, there's a need for this title because it's not covered by existing journals.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know people who have done that. I mean, people who have started new journals with big publishing houses. And to begin with, of course, it is a slow start because it takes a while for people to know of its existence and publish in it. But that I would say you should consider that.
Yeah, and that was actually my second question, because on one of your last slides there was this graph, starting from 2016, and again, I'm awfully sorry, is that the year when you started publishing, or you just chose this?
We started publishing I should know this. It was more than 20 years ago. Jeep. ESP Journal is older. Is considerably older. That goes back to the 1980s. But Jeep So for a long while, EAP articles were published in ESP Journal, and then case in point, it was proposed that really we needed a special journal for EAP. And I think it might be 25 years it's been going. I'm just trying to think. I should know this. I'm sorry. Because we're having, I think it's coming up 25 years. Yes.
Yeah, but that was the right time. And again, you were kind of offered that particular niche, okay? And that was the right time for this. For
yes,
your
that's
journal
right.
as well,
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But you know, to begin with, you know, the first few issues people haven't heard of, you know, gradually builds up. It builds up a reputation over time.
Yeah.
And so that would be the case with your journal. I mean, an ex-editor of G, Paul Thompson, he started a new journal with Elsevier called Applied Corpus Linguistics, and that's just been going for a year or two now, and it's just gradually building up. So to begin with, there's not actually very much work for the editors to do because there aren't very many submissions. You know, it gradually builds up over time.
Yeah, it does take time. Yeah, it does take time.
Thank you very much. Marina, do you have more questions?
Yeah, sure. I've got loads of
I can continue after our questions because we are limited in our time. So, ladies, do you have the questions? Yes, Galia, Гафиятова, we can ask one more question, then our time limit.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk, and thank you very much for your projects you did, because you inspired a lot of researchers like me for doing a lot of research in corpus linguistics. So the question,
that's nice to know.
Yeah, thank you. And the question is about the scope again. For example, we are studying school textbooks, and you said that in your journals you accept only English for academic purposes, and the question is that K-12 for the textbooks in this genre, we can say, or in this field,
yes,
are they considered so?
Well, if they were English language teaching textbooks for schools, no. But if they were, let's say, geography textbooks in English for schools, or maths textbooks in English, then yes, we don't publish very much that's below tertiary level. But we would be, that would be a very interesting. We do occasionally publish articles about materials that are used for studying in the disciplines below tertiary level. So yes. You know, if you were analysing, if you were analysing the texts in a geography textbook, if they were in English, but that would assume that in your context it was English medium instruction, you know, at secondary school or CLIL or something. But yeah.
No, I think that I'm awfully sorry. That is about comparing, Galia. That's what you mean, So the text for the same audience, like Russian textbooks, say biology textbooks, and the same field, the textbooks of the same field aimed for American or British students. So we compare.
Yes, okay. You'd have to bear in mind that the vast majority of the readers wouldn't read Russian. And so if you were doing some sort of a linguistic analysis, it would be quite laborious because you'd have to translate everything, and quite a lot would get lost in translation. So it might not be the best. It depends really what kind of analysis you were doing. I mean, if you were only doing analysis of one particular linguistic feature, or 2 or 3 linguistic features, so there wasn't a whole lot of Russian in there. I seem to remember just recently we had a paper published which was about Spanish texts and English texts, where there was, I can't remember, I think they were talking about some modals or something, and it was enough. There wasn't a huge amount of Spanish text, and it was translated, but the original was provided as well, because you know, something, so as not to lose because it might have been badly translated, you know, or there might be disagreements about how it was translated. So it's possible, yes, it's possible.
Thank you very much for all your answers. Thank you. So if you have questions, you can just write me and then we will send it by mail to Hilari Nesi.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Our technical support says me to stop because the Zoom will stop in 5 minutes.
Okay, all right, well, better say goodbye then.
We have to finish now. It's time to finish, and I would like to thank all our participants and everybody who joined us, and my special thanks to our speakers for their very interesting and insightful presentations. And tomorrow we expect presentation by 3 editors-in-chief, Dr. Daniel Chan, the editor-in-chief of the EFLT Journal Index in Scopus Database, Boldarov Nikolai, he is a doctor of philology, professor, honored scientist of the Russian Federation, editor-in-chief of the journal Issues of Cognitive Linguistics and Serious Cognitive Studies of Language. And also we expect Dr. Marta Anton, the editor-in-chief of the Modern Language Journal Index in Scopus. Итак, уважаемые коллеги, наша встреча подходит к концу. Я хотела бы поблагодарить всех наших участников, всех, кто присоединился к нашей сегодняшней встрече, а также хотела бы вас пригласить на завтрашнюю сессию. У нас ожидается выступление 3 редакторов международных журналов. Это доктор Дэниел Чан, Болдаров Николай Николаевич и Марта Антон. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Спасибо большое. Надеемся встретиться с вами завтра. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.